Nearly 6 years ago, this case here, the Lee PCTU100, was released for around 100 USD. Now, I think it was definitely ahead of its time. It was a small form factor, had a suitcase handle, and the build quality was phenomenal. But I think they never intended for someone to cram in 6 years later a 9900K, a water cooler, and also an RTX 2060, which is exactly what we're going to be doing here today. And in ways it's all coming about because we're using the Corsair SF power supplies. These are really small, but in this case we're going to be using a 750 watt gold power supply that has over 60 amps available on the 12 volt line. This thing is pretty much half of an AX1500, yet that power supply is so much bigger. And for the motherboard, we're using a Z390 from ASRock. It's got Thunderbolt at the front, it's got all the expansion you'd want, as well as the ability to overclock the 9900K. And then we're using a Gigabyte RTX 2060 Mini, which will fit inside this little case here. So this build is gonna pack a serious punch. However, you probably noticed that we've taped out the bottom here, and we've also taped out the top. That is because if we don't drill some holes in this thing, it is seriously going to overheat. And in fact, I'd say the design was never intended for something like this, with this much power going through it. But regardless, my need for this is the fact that when I travel, I need a mobile 4K video editing powerhouse, and I need it to be small and I need to be able to carry it. So this fits the bill perfectly. And with that aside, let's drill this thing out and see if we can put it together properly without any hiccups. So here we are now, we've finished the top here, we've smoothed that off. There's a lot of work actually, even though it doesn't look like much. And then we got the bottom, we got some bigger holes drilled in there because that's just for the graphics card. And so we've got airflow for the graphics card, we've got outtake here now for the radiator and fan, then we've got intake at the front. So hopefully now we can start installing these PC parts and have a build that won't overheat, but also still carry such a small size and footprint. Here it is, it's finished. We're gonna boot it up and of course see if it works. But after that, we're also gonna start tuning this thing. I'm just off the top of my head, I'm going to go for around 4.4 gigahertz because with the 9900K, after those levels, it just starts to hit an inefficiency curve where you're using up a lot more power and those extra 600 megahertz will end up costing you probably double the power consumption, which in this case, like literally, we have to keep the power consumption down as much as possible. So we'll be going for efficiency curves both on the GPU and the CPU, and let's get the show started. Well, gotta turn the thing on first. So there's the results in now. We've been stress testing for over 10 minutes and we've got 73 degrees max, which I am super happy with these temperatures in this little box. Power consumption's about 158 watts, I think. That's the max I measured at the wall. And so now we're still gonna add the GPU into the loop, which I'm a little bit scared about, but we're gonna do that and then come back and see the total power consumption and also the temperatures this time around. So now we've finished up with the GPU test added on. So everything's being stressed, CPU and GPU, and we're getting about 300 watts power draw from the wall. And the fan speeds are going up to about 92%. Graphics card is hard locked at 83 degrees. So it looks like it will be slightly throttling in this case. But the CPU, the temperatures are very well controlled still, 76 degrees max. So I'm very happy with the CPU at the moment, but the GPU is getting a little bit hot. So we're gonna try something a little bit different, because this case does enable you to quickly release the side panel here, and that will be beneficial when we are editing videos, because I don't really care too much about the aesthetics. This thing has one purpose, and that is to travel and then put on a desk and then get the most out of it. So let's leave this side panel off now for another 10 minutes and come back with the temperatures and see how it fared. So leaving the side panel off, unfortunately didn't do much to change the total outlook. The CPU is pretty much hovering around the same temperatures. The noise, of course, is a little bit louder now coming outside the case, and the GPU's still getting pretty hot. But ultimately, I believe this thing is still going to be able to edit videos absolutely fine, as the thermal imaging camera is showing that still inside near the motherboard and CPU, things are pretty cool. The radiator at the front is remaining very cool, and also the outtake is pretty damn awesome. But now there's only really one thing left to do. Well, actually two things. I'm going to check the lowest voltage I can use for the CPU at 4.4 gigahertz and see if that drops the power consumption even just down by a little bit. Then we're gonna run some gaming benchmarks and see how this little beast box, the Yes Mini, performs. Oh yeah. So all the gaming numbers are in, and what an impressive display by this little Yes Mini box here. We've got in Apex Legends at high settings, we've got 123 average FPS, 77 1% low, 70.1% low. Dota 2 was over 200 average FPS at max settings at 1080p, 91% lows and 40.1% lows. And the good thing here, the GPU wasn't still being stressed at near 100%. Moving over to Shadows of the Tomb Raider though, latest and greatest title, high settings, 1080p, we're getting over 100 FPS. And all these three games were using about 200 to 250 watts while we were playing them. They're still under that max limit of AIDA64's 300 watts that we saw before. And now it's time to talk about all the components in this build, because I'm honestly just blown away by this thing. It is going to be an absolute powerhouse when I travel overseas. And in fact, I think a lot more people who are traveling and doing video work for events like Computex and CES and stuff like that will definitely want one of these, because it's so unique to the point where you've got the handle, you can carry it around, it's lightweight, and it's also got the 9900K inside and the RTX 2060, and the balance is just so good. Now, we did manage to undervolt it to about 1.05 volts at 4.4 gigahertz. We dropped the 110 watt figure down to about 95 watts. And something I learned about the 9900K is I think at that 5 gigahertz setting, it's really past its efficiency curve. I think actually around 4.4 gigahertz is where you're going to get the best performance per watt out of this CPU, and it's still going to be a beast of a CPU at these speeds. But this is really one of those things where the past meets 2019. A 2013 case, I just honestly couldn't think of a better candidate. In fact, these things are getting so rare that I only managed to get the silver version, but I just checked on eBay and there's a guy in Italy selling them for about 110 euro, and he actually isn't charging too much for shipping. He's only got 7 available with the black one, and I actually might buy the black version because I think it'll look better than the silver version. And I got the idea from this when I was over at Christopher Yee's place in the US when we were in Vegas doing that competition. If you haven't seen that video already, I'll put the link up here, but he had this case with different older hardware in it, and he said, take a look at this thing. And I took a look and I thought, wow, straight away, I saw the potential. So I started researching up about it, and I thought, well, why don't we just try to do a magical build in this thing? And this is where I'm gonna really put an emphasis on this. Things literally just fit, like just fit. It was a massive pain in the bum to build in. It was just crazy how much effort it took to get this thing right and get everything packed in. But the end product is all that matters. It's something that works really well. It's something that's so small, so portable, but at the same time, it wouldn't be possible with all these components inside. So for the water cooler, we had the H60, and then we changed that around to 2 light loop fans. And you might be thinking, okay, why do you need the RGB bling? It's actually for functionality as well. So I've got these with the front one set up to a temperature of the CPU, the top set up to the GPU. So if they go red, that's when I know they're both entering the danger zone, and I might want to save my work, turn the PC off, try and diagnose some things. So they actually are for functionality in this purpose of the mini-itx PC here. But moving on with some other components, the SF 750 watt power supply we put in. This is Corsair's new lineup and new refreshment of their small form factor power supplies. Now the cables are about half the length of your normal cables that would come with other power supplies. And so this really made it possible because we needed shorter cable runs, and we also had to get in a small form factor power supply with enough juice to power everything. The thing about this power supply was it's so overpowered, even for this little build, that when we were on full load, the fan wouldn't spin up for literally like 10 minutes until the benchmark, and then it just decided to turn on a little bit, so it was whisper quiet. I even tested it on the other rig when I was overclocking the 9900K and the 2080 Ti and getting 600 watts, and these power supplies really hold up. They've also got an FS600, which would do absolutely fine in this build, and an SF450, even though the prices vary. They go from $95 to 180 US on Amazon at the moment. Honestly, the SF450 would do absolutely fine in this build, despite it having such high-powered components. Now for the motherboard, we're using the ASRock mini-itx Z390 chipset here, and this thing is phenomenal, had no hiccups whatsoever. Of course, with ASRock's BIOS, it's so easy to use, yet it's so detailed. I had no hiccups whatsoever getting all the hardware inside to work. We're also using 2 16GB 2400 LPX sticks from Corsair. This was actually super important to have low profile memory in this case because we had to mount the radiator at the front, and if we didn't have the RAM this shallow, then we would have came into a problem where the build, we would have to do some serious hacking to get that radiator working at the front. Then came the graphics card at the bottom, the RTX 2060 Mini. This was the only card I could imagine in the RTX 2060 series that would fit inside this case. And in fact, when we were installing the radiator, we had to push that up and then get the graphics card in and then push the radiator back down. It was such a tight fit, but in the end, it all worked out. Everything performs phenomenally well. The graphics card does get up to 83 degrees when we are gaming at 100% load, but even when we saw the Heaven benchmark numbers, with the side panel off, we had just over 2,900 points, and then with the side panel back on, we're getting 2,895 points. So basically all that happens with the GPU is once it hits 83 degrees, it just starts throttling the megahertz down. So it's nothing to worry about. This GPU will perform phenomenally well, especially since I'm not going to be using this PC all the time. It's mainly a travel rig and or a gaming rig in my spare time. And honestly, I don't get much time to game nowadays because I'm constantly hustling, I'm constantly making videos and doing all other things non-gaming related, although I do love playing a bit of Dota 2 every now and then, and this thing just absolutely smokes Dota 2. Very responsive, amazing experience, and it's just so damn good. Anyway guys, if you enjoyed this TU100 build right here, then be sure to slap that like button. Also let us know in the comments, what do you think would look better, the silver or the black version? I think the black version would be more sleek. The silver version kind of looks like a musical carry case, which I guess would be good in the case of traveling, because this is the reason I built this. I don't want much attention. I want that portability. I want something that's going to be able to survive a bit of a beating. And this thing has it all. The build quality is phenomenal. Everything inside is just really good components. Big thanks to ASRock and also Corsair for sending out the cooler, power supply, and the motherboard. Wouldn't be possible without these components. If you guys want to check out something like this and build something similar, then I'll put some links in the description below. But this thing here in 2019 is easily the best mini-itx case out there at the moment, especially for what I want to do with it, and that is just a mobile powerhouse that is still very small. And with all that said, I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.